These are assembly instructions for my triple column card, and I've called it Make It a Double. I'm starting with my card base, and I have 2 score lines on my card base, and I'm folding down on the score lines. And so one of these score lines becomes a valley fold, so I fold it like a V, and the other one becomes a mountain fold. And then I have my 3 pieces to create the columns for my card. The difference between them is that there are different sizes, but they all have the same score lines. So I'm just folding down on all 3 score lines. Next I have my 3 images, so I've used print and cut for these, and for each one I have an offset that's cut out of 80-pound cardstock. So I'm just gluing my images down to their offsets, trying to create an even border all the way around. I'm going to take my largest column and my largest image. I'm putting glue on the underside of the offset of my largest image. I have a tab on the right. I'm going to fold that under, and then I'm gluing this to the center panel, trying to leave an even border all the way around. This is my medium-sized column, and I'm doing the same thing. I'm folding my tab under. I'm putting glue on the offset of my middle-sized image, and then positioning my image in the center between the score lines, like so. And then I have the smallest set, and I'm doing the same thing with it. So next I have the decorative layers for my card base. So my bottom layer is 80-pound cardstock, and the layer on top is 65-pound shimmer cardstock. And I've printed this plaid pattern from an image that I found in Design Space. I'm not going to glue this one down yet. I'm putting glue on the underside of my dark beige layers and just gluing them, and they should fit with an even border on all 3 panels of my base piece. So for the 2 smaller panels, I'm gluing down the printed shimmer cardstock. As much as possible, I want an even border all the way around. This panel is going to go here, but I'm not going to glue it down yet. I'm going to take my 3 column pieces. I'm taking the tab on the larger one, and I'm inserting it into the largest cutout that's on my printed panel. I'm going to flip my piece over. I'm putting glue all over my tab. I am folding it over and gluing it down on the underside of my printed piece. I'm taking my second panel. I'm inserting the tab, flipping my card over, putting glue on the underside of my tab. I want the cut edge of that cutout to be right along the score line, and that will ensure that my panel is as straight as possible. And then I'm doing that with the smallest one as well. I'm just inserting the tab into the cutout. I'm putting glue all over the underside of that tab. I'm positioning my score line right along the edge of the cutout and then folding it back. So I've got my 3 panels glued in. I'm going to flip the smallest one over. I'm folding on the score line and putting glue all over that rectangle. And then I'm folding it flat again, so right on the score line that's at the cutout, and flattening my piece. That tab is glued onto the previous panel like so. And then I'm going to do the same thing with this one. I'm folding it in the opposite direction, then folding over on that first score line, putting glue all over that rectangle, and then folding again while I'm tucking this flap under and flattening everything out. So I've got that panel folded on where that cutout is, not on the first score line, but the second one as you're looking from above. So next I'm going to take my card base. I'm putting glue all over the underside of my card, including those tabs, with the smallest image towards my right. I'm positioning my printed panel so that there's an even border all the way around on all 4 sides. And then I'm folding all of my panels towards the right. I'm putting glue on that very last undecorated panel. And then I'm bringing the left part of my card over, and I'm applying pressure where I've just put that glue, so about this area. So everything folds nice and flat. I'm going to fold that over. And so basically that is what the card should look like. Now I thought it would be fun to make a double column card. So I'm going to repeat those steps, but in a mirror image. I've got the exact same card base and I'm folding down on the score lines for it. I want this score line to be a valley fold and this score line to be a mountain fold. And then I have my decorative layers for my card base. I'm putting this one aside for now and just gluing these down, trying to keep an even border all the way around all of my layers. Now that I've glued down the panels on my base, I am folding on all the score lines for my column. What's different about these is that they are mirror images of the previous one. I'm gluing down my images the exact same way as I did for the first half. I'm just making sure that the tab on my base pieces are to the left and not to the right. I'm doing the same thing as I did for the first part. I'm inserting the tab of the largest piece into the largest cutout that's on my base. I'm flipping my base over. I'm putting glue on the tab from the score line to the edge, carefully positioning my tab so the edge of it is right against the edge of the cutout, like so. And then I'm taking my middle-sized piece and doing the same thing, flipping my piece over, putting glue from the score line to the edge on my tab, positioning my tab so that score line is right against the edge of my cutout. And the same thing for my third piece. So next I'm going to take the smallest of my images. I'm folding it towards my left, folding towards the right on that first score line, putting glue all over it, and then I'm folding my piece back on the score line that's at the edge of my cutout, and I'm tucking that flap under and gluing it to its neighboring panel. And then I'm folding that panel over, folding the panel back, putting glue all over it, and then folding my panel at the cutout with that piece tucked under and gluing that piece to my largest column. And then I'm putting glue all over the underside of my card. I'm positioning my printed panel so that it is as centered as possible on my dark beige panel. And then I'm folding everything over towards the left. I'm folding that last segment towards the right, putting glue all over that rectangle, and then pulling everything to the right with the glue tucked under. So now I have my two halves done, and I have my joined piece, and it has a score line down the middle, and I'm folding it in both directions. I'm putting glue from the score line to the edge on one half of it, and I'm positioning the right hand side of my card against the right hand side of that tab. I'm going to flip it over and I'm just spreading that glue. And then I'm putting glue from the score line to the end on the other side of that tab. And I'm taking my left hand side and then gluing it to the other side, making sure that the top and the bottom of my two cards are even. And so that joins our two cards to make one. And then I'm just adding on some decorative panels on those two center ones. So when I close my card, this becomes the cover of my card. So I'm going to rotate my card so I've got the open end towards the bottom. I'm finding the center of my card, making a little tick mark, and then I'm flipping it over. So this is the back of my card, and I'm finding the center of it as well. And I'm taking some red line tape, centering my red line tape over my tick mark, like so. And I'm doing that on the front as well. So it's about 1/4 inch up from the edge of my card, and just centering as best I can. Then I have two pieces of ribbon, and I have cut them to 8 inches in length. And I'm taking one of my pieces of ribbon and just placing it as centered as possible on my piece of red line tape. And then I'm covering it again with another piece of red line tape, so just over the existing piece. And I'm flipping my card over. And I'm doing the same thing with my second piece of ribbon, placing my ribbon on top and then adding more red line tape. So that ribbon is there to keep my card closed. So next I have the back of my card. So this is where you would sign the card. I have the 2 layers, just like the interior of my card. I have my print and cut on my shimmer cardstock, and I'm just gluing those 2 down, trying to center them as best I can. And I'm opening my card, making sure that this is indeed the back panel. I'm putting glue on the underside of my back panel. I'm removing the liner on my red line tape, and I'm positioning the back of my card, trying to center it as best I can. And then I'm going to flip it over. And for the front, I have 4 layers of 110-pound cardstock, which I've glued on top of one another, including the centers of the letters. So the 3 R's, the O, and the A have centers to them. So I've stacked all of them up and glued them all on top of one another. And then I've glued that 110-pound cardstock layer on 80-pound cardstock and on foil craft board. So they're just layered up on top of one another. This makes my cover very sturdy. And again, I'm removing the liner, my red line tape that's covering my ribbon. I'm putting glue on the underside of my cover panel, and then I'm just positioning it on top, and again trying to center it as much as I can. So I have one little tiny finishing touch. So I've cut the letters Boo out of 3 different colors of foil cardstock. I'm just positioning my letters on top of my 80-pound cardstock base. So I'm just dry fitting my letters first and then just gluing them in place. And I'm putting glue on the underside of the B and the thicker part of the O. And then I'm just going to glue this down on the right hand side like so. So it makes for a very large card, but it folds down to 5 by 7 with quite a bit of dimension.